Most men are confused about love because they were taught fairy tales instead of human nature. Attraction isn't magic, destiny, or luck. It's psychology. It's patterns. It's incentives. Today, we strip love down to its raw truth and uncomfortable, liberating, and deeply stoic, so you finally understand why women choose the men they choose. When people talk about love, they often describe it as something mystical, accidental, or uncontrollable. But when you strip away poetry and excuses, what remains is far more grounded and far more revealing. Women fall in love first and foremost because of how a man makes them feel about themselves when they are with him. Not how he feels about them, not how intensely he wants them, but how their inner world shifts in his presence. This is where most men misunderstand attraction, because they assume effort equals value. In reality, emotional impact equals value. A woman's emotional system is constantly scanning for signals of safety, direction, and meaning. When she is around a man, her nervous system is asking silent questions. Can I relax here? Do I feel understood without having to explain myself? Do I feel more like myself, or less? Am I calmer, or more anxious? These questions are answered not by words, but by energy, behavior, and emotional regulation. A man who is centered within himself creates a sense of emotional shelter, not because he rescues or fixes, but because he is stable enough to remain unaffected by chaos. Most men talk too much because they are trying to manufacture connection. They explain themselves, justify their intentions, and overshare emotions they haven't yet learned to manage. This creates the opposite of attraction. It tells a woman that he is unsure of his own position. A man who feels grounded does not rush to be understood. He allows understanding to form naturally. His presence communicates confidence without performance. This makes a woman feel chosen rather than pressured, desired rather than consumed. There is a profound difference between attention and attunement. Attention is loud. It seeks validation. It needs feedback. Attunement is quiet. It listens. It observes. It responds instead of reacts. Women fall in love with men who are emotionally attuned because attunement makes them feel seen without being dissected. It allows emotional closeness without emotional suffocation. A man who can sit with a woman's emotions without trying to fix them sends a powerful signal. I am not threatened by complexity. I am not overwhelmed by depth. I can hold space. Emotional safety does not mean emotional weakness. In fact, it is the opposite. Emotional safety is created by strength that is controlled. A man who can feel deeply but act deliberately. A man who does not collapse under stress or lash out when frustrated. When a woman senses that a man can remain calm while life applies pressure, she associates him with stability. That stability becomes addictive, because the modern world is loud, chaotic, and emotionally exhausting. Women are not drawn to men who constantly reassure them. They are drawn to men whose presence itself is reassuring. This comes from internal order, from a man who has faced his own fears, confronted his insecurities, and disciplined his impulses. Such a man does not need to dominate conversations or assert his importance. His certainty is quiet. His confidence does not ask for permission. When he speaks, it is measured. When he listens, it is intentional. This makes a woman feel important, not because she is pedestalized, but because she is respected. Another critical element is emotional consistency. Inconsistency creates anxiety. Anxiety can create attachment, but it does not create lasting love. Women may become emotionally entangled with inconsistent men, but they do not feel safe loving them deeply. Love requires predictability at an emotional level, not boredom, but reliability. A man who is warm one day and distant the next trains a woman's nervous system to stay alert. A man who is emotionally steady allows her to rest, and rest is where love grows. This steadiness is not about routine gestures or constant availability. It is about emotional coherence. His reactions match the situation. His values guide his choices. His mood does not dictate his behavior. This alignment between inner state and outward action creates trust. And trust is not built through declarations, it is built through repeated emotional experiences that confirm, again and again, that he is who he appears to be. Women also fall in love with men who evoke growth, not through pressure, but through example. When a man lives with discipline, purpose, and self-respect, it invites a woman to rise. She feels more focused, more inspired, more grounded in his presence. This is not because he demands change, but because his way of being sets a standard. Love often forms when a woman associates a man with her better self. Many men sabotage this by trying to impress rather than embody. They perform ambition instead of living it. They speak about values instead of practicing them. Women are highly perceptive to this mismatch. When words and behavior are misaligned, trust erodes quietly. But when a man's life speaks louder than his mouth, attraction deepens without effort. Another overlooked aspect is emotional restraint. In a culture that equates vulnerability with oversharing, men are encouraged to unload emotions indiscriminately. But emotional mastery is not emotional suppression, nor is it emotional flooding. It is discernment. A man who processes his emotions internally before expressing them externally creates emotional clarity. This clarity makes a woman feel safe, because she is not being pulled into unresolved inner chaos. Women fall in love with men who are comfortable with silence. Silence indicates presence without desperation. It signals that connection does not need constant stimulation to survive. In silence, emotional truth surfaces. A man who can share quiet moments without anxiety communicates abundance. He is not afraid of emptiness because his inner world is full. There is also the matter of boundaries. Boundaries are often misunderstood as distance, but they are actually the foundation of intimacy. A man who knows his limits, his standards, and his priorities makes a woman feel secure because she knows where she stands. Boundaries remove confusion. They replace emotional guessing games with clarity. When a woman does not have to decode a man's intentions, her energy is freed to connect rather than protect. Protection, in this sense, is not physical dominance. It is emotional leadership, the ability to guide interactions toward calm rather than conflict, to de-escalate rather than inflame, to remain principled under pressure. Emotional leadership makes a woman feel she is not alone in navigating life. That feeling is deeply bonding. It is important to understand that women do not fall in love because a man needs them. Need creates pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Women fall in love when they feel wanted but not required for a man's sense of self. When a man's happiness is self-generated, his affection feels like a gift rather than a burden. This dynamic allows love to be chosen freely, not traded for emotional survival. A stoic man understands that his responsibility is not to control outcomes, but to govern his own character. When he focuses on virtue, discipline, and inner order, attraction becomes a byproduct. Women sense this alignment. They feel it before they can explain it. It registers as calm, confidence, and quiet strength. Ultimately, women fall in love with how a man makes them feel about themselves because love is a mirror. A grounded man reflects back a sense of worth, peace, and possibility. Not through flattery, but through presence. Not through promises, but through consistency. And once a woman associates a man with emotional safety and self-expansion, love follows naturally, without force, without chasing, and without fear.
When a woman falls in love, she is not only responding to how she feels in the moment, but to what a man represents in the larger narrative of her life. This is the layer of attraction that most men never consciously understand, yet it quietly governs long-term desire, commitment, and devotion. Love is not formed in isolation. It is formed in context. A man becomes meaningful when he fits into a woman's internal map of where she has been, where she is, and where she hopes to go. Every woman carries an evolving story about herself. This story is shaped by her childhood, her relationships, her disappointments, her ambitions, and her fears. When she meets a man, she does not evaluate him only as an individual. She evaluates him as a symbol. What role would he play in my life? Would he stabilize my world or destabilize it? Would he help me grow or pull me backwards? Would he bring peace or intensity? Meaning is assigned long before love is confessed. This is why two women can meet the same man and experience entirely different levels of attraction. The man has not changed. The stories have. One woman may see him as safety, maturity, and reliability. Another may see him as boring or emotionally unavailable. What he represents depends on what she needs, values, and is prepared for at that stage of her life. Love forms when representation aligns with readiness. Women do not fall in love with a man's potential future if his present does not support it. Representation is not about fantasy, it is about evidence. A man represents stability if his life is stable. He represents growth if he is actively growing. He represents leadership if he leads himself. Words alone cannot create representation. Only lived patterns can. A man who wakes up with purpose, structures his days, and accepts responsibility for his outcomes begins to represent order in a chaotic world. This is deeply attractive, not because it is flashy, but because it is rare. Many men drift. They react to life instead of directing it. When a woman encounters a man who is internally directed, she senses that being with him would reduce uncertainty rather than increase it. Representation also works negatively. A man can represent confusion, emotional volatility, or stagnation, even if he is kind, even if he is attractive. If his life feels unresolved, a woman subconsciously associates him with risk. Love struggles to grow in environments perceived as unsafe. Safety here does not mean comfort alone. It means predictability of character. It means knowing that today's version of him will not collapse tomorrow. Women are deeply sensitive to momentum, not speed, but direction. A man who is moving forward slowly still represents progress. A man who is stuck represents limitation. A woman may enjoy moments with a stuck man, but she will hesitate to build a future with him. Love may spark, but it will not anchor. Representation determines whether attraction stays superficial or becomes foundational. Another powerful element is what a man symbolizes socially and psychologically. Not status in the shallow sense, but positioning. How does he move through the world? How does he treat others? How does he handle adversity? A man who handles challenges with composure represents resilience. A man who collapses under pressure represents instability. These impressions are formed quietly through observation, not interrogation. Women also assign meaning based on how a man treats his own life. A man who respects his time, his body, his work, and his values represents self-worth. When a woman connects with such a man, she often feels that being chosen by him elevates her own sense of worth. This is not ego, it is psychology. Humans desire proximity to individuals who embody qualities they admire or wish to strengthen within themselves. This is why women often lose attraction when a man begins to abandon his standards to please them. The man who once represented strength now represents insecurity. The man who once represented direction now represents dependence. Nothing external changed, yet the meaning shifted. Love weakens when representation erodes. Women also fall in love with men who represent emotional leadership. This does not mean control, it means the ability to guide emotional climates. A man who can navigate conflict calmly, who does not escalate tension, who does not retreat into silence or explode into anger, represents maturity. Maturity is one of the most underappreciated attractors because it is felt more than seen. Representation is closely tied to trust in the future. When a woman imagines her future with a man, she is not imagining perfection. She is imagining survivability. How would we handle stress, loss, change, growth? A man who has demonstrated resilience and accountability becomes associated with survivability. This association deepens love beyond chemistry. It is also important to understand that some women fall in love with men who represent chaos or intensity. This often happens when unresolved emotional wounds equate volatility with passion. In these cases, the man represents distraction, escape, or emotional familiarity. The attraction can be powerful, but it is rarely peaceful. Stoic understanding recognizes that not all love is healthy, and not all attraction is worth sustaining. A man who understands representation does not try to be everything to everyone. He becomes selective. He lives according to his values, knowing that alignment will attract those who resonate and repel those who do not. This is strength. This is honesty. This is masculine clarity. Representation is reinforced through consistency. One strong gesture does not define a man. Repeated behavior does. A man who consistently chooses discipline over impulse represents reliability. A man who consistently chooses integrity over convenience represents trustworthiness. Over time, these traits form a stable emotional image that a woman can attach love to without fear. Women often say they want to feel inspired by their partner. Inspiration does not come from motivational speeches. It comes from witnessing a man live in accordance with his principles even when it is difficult. That kind of integrity creates quiet admiration. Admiration is a powerful foundation for love, far stronger than infatuation. A man also represents how a woman will feel about herself in the long term. Will she feel calmer or more anxious, more focused or more scattered, more secure or more doubtful? Love grows when a woman associates a man with self-respect rather than self-betrayal. When being with him feels like alignment rather than compromise. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control how others perceive us, only how we live. This is crucial. A man who tries to manage his image loses authenticity. A man who commits to virtue allows representation to form naturally. Women sense when a man is grounded in who he is rather than who he is trying to appear to be. In the end, women fall in love with what a man represents because love is not just an emotion, it is a decision informed by meaning. A man becomes lovable when he stands for something solid, something real, something consistent. When his life has structure, direction, and inner order, he becomes a symbol of stability in a world that rarely offers it. And once a woman associates a man with safety, growth, and clarity, love does not feel risky. It feels logical. It feels grounding. It feels like coming home. The hardest truth most men avoid is not about women at all. It is about themselves. Women do not fall in love with intentions, apologies, or potential futures. They fall in love with patterns, repeated behavior, emotional consistency. The man you are on your worst day matters more than the man you promise to be on your best day. This truth is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It removes the fantasy that love can be negotiated through effort alone. Love responds to who you repeatedly show yourself to be. Many men believe that attraction is built through grand gestures or emotional declarations. They think intensity equals depth. But intensity without structure feels unsafe. It feels unpredictable. A woman may be drawn to it briefly, but she will not rest in it. Rest is essential for love. A nervous system that is constantly activated cannot bond deeply. It can only cling, detach, or oscillate between the two. Patterns reveal priorities. If a man says he values honesty but lies when uncomfortable, the pattern speaks louder. If he claims to want commitment but disappears during conflict, the pattern defines him. Women observe these patterns quietly. They may not confront them immediately, but they internalize them. Love weakens when the internal record shows inconsistency between words and actions. The most attractive men are not perfect. They are coherent. Their behavior makes sense over time. A woman can predict how they will respond emotionally, even if she cannot predict life itself. This predictability is not boring, it is stabilizing. It allows intimacy to deepen without fear of sudden emotional withdrawal or escalation. Many men sabotage attraction by reacting instead of responding. They let emotions dictate behavior. Anger leads to harsh words. Insecurity leads to control. Fear leads to avoidance. Each reaction leaves an imprint. Over time, these imprints form a pattern of emotional unreliability. Love struggles to survive where emotional volatility is normalized. A man who has mastered himself does not eliminate emotion, he disciplines it. He feels fully but acts deliberately. This discipline creates trust. A woman may disagree with his decisions, but she respects the process behind them. Respect is essential. Desire without respect fades. Love without respect collapses. Another difficult truth is that neediness erodes attraction faster than rejection. When a man places his emotional stability in a woman's hands, he creates pressure. That pressure feels like responsibility. Responsibility feels like obligation. Obligation suffocates desire. Women do not want to be the source of a man's identity. They want to be a complement to a life already anchored. Men often believe that sacrificing themselves proves love. In reality, self-abandonment communicates lack of self-worth. When a man abandons his boundaries, values, or goals to keep a woman, he stops representing strength. What once felt secure now feels fragile. Love cannot stand on fragility. Patterns also include how a man handles loss, frustration, and disappointment. Life will test every relationship. A woman watches how a man responds when things do not go his way. Does he become bitter, blame others, collapse into self-pity, or does he adapt, learn, and move forward? These moments define long-term attraction far more than romantic highs. The truth most men avoid is that attraction is not maintained by pleasing a woman, but by remaining aligned with oneself. The man who changes his core to avoid conflict slowly loses the very qualities that created attraction. Peace purchased through self-betrayal is temporary. Resentment always follows. Consistency does not mean rigidity. A stoic man adapts without losing his center. He listens without dissolving. He compromises without surrendering his identity. This balance creates emotional gravity. Women feel pulled toward men who are flexible yet firm, open yet grounded. Another uncomfortable reality is that women sense when a man's life lacks direction, even if he is kind and attentive. Love cannot substitute purpose. A relationship cannot become the center of a man's life without becoming a burden. When a man has no mission beyond a woman, she feels unconsciously responsible for his fulfillment. That weight diminishes desire. Men also avoid the truth that attraction is not negotiated through logic. Explaining feelings does not fix emotional misalignment. Promising change does not replace demonstrated change. Women trust what they experience repeatedly, not what they are told once in a moment of fear. The Stoic understands impermanence. He knows that nothing external can be controlled, including love. This understanding paradoxically makes him more attractive. He does not cling, he does not beg, he does not attempt to force outcomes. He focuses on his character, his actions, his discipline. This focus creates inner stability. A man who fears loss will behave in ways that cause loss. A man who accepts loss remains centered even when challenged. This emotional self-sufficiency allows love to flow freely rather than be gripped tightly. Love grows where there is space, not surveillance. Another hard truth is that some women will leave no matter how good a man is. Not because he failed, but because alignment changed. The Stoic does not internalize this as inadequacy. He evaluates honestly, learns where necessary, and continues forward without bitterness. Bitterness poisons future connection. Patterns also include how a man treats himself. Does he keep promises to himself? Does he maintain discipline when no one is watching? A woman may not see every detail, but she senses self-respect. Self-respect radiates. It affects posture, tone, pacing, decision-making. Love is drawn to men who respect their own lives. Men often underestimate the power of emotional restraint, speaking less, reacting slower, choosing words carefully. These habits communicate control. Control over oneself is far more attractive than control over others. A man who cannot control himself cannot be trusted with intimacy. The deepest truth is this: women fall in love with a man who remains himself whether love is present or not. A man who does not perform masculinity but lives it. A man whose values are not situational. A man whose strength does not disappear when challenged. Stoicism teaches that the goal is not to be loved, but to be worthy of love. Worthiness comes from character, not validation. When a man builds a life rooted in discipline, purpose, and inner order, love becomes a welcome addition, not a necessity. And if love leaves, the Stoic does not collapse. He grieves without losing himself. He reflects without self-destruction. He continues without resentment. This resilience is rare. This resilience is magnetic. In the end, the hardest truth is simple. Women fall in love with what you repeatedly are, not what you occasionally show. Master your patterns, and you master attraction. Master yourself, and love will meet you without force.